Hi.
Yay!
Oh my God. Thank you for your
Like you can
patience.
literally do it twice in a row, and one time it works, one time it
One
doesn't.
time, yeah, this is amazing. Like the technology aspect of this time has been a fun learning
Mhm.
curve. So thank you for your patience.
Who's your cinematographer? I love it.
Do you really?
It's like a nice light coming in. It's
His,
amazing.
her name is the Sun. She
Amazing.
comes in and bounces lights outside. But I do have a massive window. I could be super extra and actually like light myself from this window if I wanted to.
Nice.
But
Nice.
I'm not. I'm not.
Oh,
But
good.
no, it's as you can see, it's like 8 a.m. here in LA. So there's like a nice light that comes in on both sides of my apartment through this like
Hmm.
bathroom right here and
Nice.
another window here. But this window hasn't yet, it's not in full glory. It's a better lighting in the afternoon for my
Mm,
end of the recording. So, but
nice.
anyway, but thank you for doing this. I was just
Of
commenting,
course.
venting to you that we originally recorded this back in September of 2018.
Hmm.
You were like my second recording ever. And I
Uh-huh.
came to your office and I was a
Yep.
hot mess and I couldn't get the audio to work and just like it was super echoey and then it wasn't record. It was just a whole thing was really
It's a test.
it was a yeah, but I felt
It's a
tremendous
test.
despair. And then I
Oh,
felt the same thing today,
no.
where I spent last night like doing all these new tests to use the new software and then couldn't get it to work. So we're here we are back on Zoom where
Yeah,
all the action happens during quarantine.
absolutely.
So how are you? It's good to see your face.
Good. You too. It's
Yeah.
uh it's different than meeting in person.
A lot has
But
changed. Yeah.
yes. I mean, so much has changed. 2018, you came to my office in Culver City,
Yeah.
and now I'm here in my like little mini guest house in Sweden. Because I
Amazing.
moved, across the world. I got
Yeah.
married. I moved across the world. I changed, you know, jobs, kind of, not really. We can get into that.
Yeah, let's get into
So
it.
yeah,
I want to get into all the nooks and crannies.
yeah.
What is life like in Sweden right now?
Life is, I mean, I don't really truly like the word blessed, but if I would have to like sum it up in a word, I would say lucky or grateful.
Mm,
Um, just because we live in a little town called Mariefred, and it's about a 40-minute train right outside of Stockholm. We've got a castle in town, literally a castle. It's picturesque. It looks like a fairy tale. We live in the woods, so I get to go on walks daily with my dogs down to the lake, and 3 times a day we got deer in the backyard, we've got hares in the backyard, we've got a moose who walks around, I've got my birds. So it's very a big stark contrast to life in the concrete jungle that we used to call Playa Vista.
I was gonna say
So
it sounds just like LA, everything you're describing.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
No, it's so beautiful, and we live in a neighborhood that is primarily, I guess, 60/40 summer houses only.
Mm,
So normally during the winter and like right before spring, there's not too many families who are here in town. But right now, because of Corona times, everyone's left the city to come to their summer houses. So we're pretty full. Um, but Sweden has taken a vastly different approach to their Corona response than the rest of the world. I don't know how much you've been
yeah,
following that.
a little bit, but give us like a quick little overview of what that's looked like over there.
Yeah, so nothing ever truly shut down. It's funny, I was just joking to my husband last night that 2 years from now on Facebook, assuming Facebook's still around, I'll have all my friends like reposting their like 2 years ago and everyone in their masks. And here I am, like, I don't even own one, because
Yeah.
we're out here in the woods. But, it would be different if we lived in Stockholm, like actually in the city.
Yeah.
But the Swedish response has been one that is um, focused on the idea that everyone is going to get it. And the point is to slow down the influx of people into hospitals to make sure that everyone has a bed to be cared for. They shut down high schools and colleges first because the idea is all about personal responsibility, and they basically issued a set of guidelines or recommendations for
Mm,
the population. Stay home if you can, work from home if you can, don't go within 2 meters of anybody else, stagger the time you go to the store, self-quarantine, those are all the recommendations, but there's no order in place. The things that they closed, like I said, are high schools and colleges, because they assume that kids of those ages are able to teach themselves or learn via Zoom or keep themselves occupied at home. And anybody with small children, elementary school, preschool, etc., those could be essential workers. And if their kids are home and they don't have anyone to take care of their kids, they can't go to work. Right. They're really concerned about the economy. I know every country's concerned about the economy, but the way that they're trying to slow the amount of people who actually go into hospitals and wait for this herd immunity to kind of happen. It's been received with mixed reviews. A lot of people in Sweden trust the government a lot and think that it's good. But there's lots of reports, especially from other countries, coming out saying like, hey, Sweden, percentage-wise of their population, has a higher death toll or higher case toll than the Nordic countries surrounding it, Norway, Denmark, Finland. They shut down right away. Two of those countries are run by women, by the way, but they shut down right away. Right. They closed everything. They were kind of ahead of the curve there as things were happening in Italy. They were like, nope. So they have a very, very, very low number of cases, and now they're starting to open up again. We've never closed down. There's 15,000 cases right now as of April, whatever today is, 23rd, with around 1,800 people dead. The majority of those people, or that could be incorrect, I think it's something like 35 to 40%, which is a big amount, are from elder care homes, people dying because they're not getting the care that they need. But so it's an interesting place to live. We've personally been self-quarantined since about a week before LA went into lockdown, feeling our personal responsibility to our neighbors, the people around us, the fact that I'm so far away from my family. And, that's what worries me right now, is like, they're over there, I can't do anything over here. Right. But also specifically for our industry, that opens up an interesting point in that production has not shut down. The rest of the world, movies, film, TV, I've been hosting these discussions, which you've joined, to really talk about what the effect of COVID will be on the industry, where we're going next, and all of the different, parts of the industry, not just film, not just TV, but, indie film festivals, branded content, commercials, how do these things get made? When do we feel safe going back to work? Which is so different, because a lot of companies here, I've had to bite my tongue and hold back my emotion a little bit, because if I was in LA right now and Mayor Garcetti said, hey, film industry, go back to work, I wouldn't feel safe as a producer having my crew come on set and working. I mean, insurance aside, let's say the insurance companies did say, okay, we'll cover this. Let's say I had a crew member who came up to me and was like, I'll sign a waiver and say that all liability is off of you and onto me. Whatever that might be, I still wouldn't feel good right now without like proper testing or proper guidelines and figuring out how it was going to work. But, the companies here are doing it. There's a set of guidelines out there, and so they're testing it, which is actually a very good thing, because, it's not like testing on humans. It kind of is like testing on humans. We've got to test it somehow. Somehow we have to get back to work. Otherwise the industry is dead. So to start in a country that hasn't shut down is probably a good thing. And it's actually provided a lot of really interesting opportunities, in that many of the production companies out here are offering up remote direction to brands, companies, et cetera, in the United States, the UK, et cetera, saying, hey, our crews are working. We've got a set of guidelines. That's what I was waiting for, by the way, because at first people were offering it and no one was saying what they were doing. So I would be like on LinkedIn or on, Instagram commenting, being like, hey, what precautions do you have in place? Like, talk about it, because it's so important for an industry-wide discussion to happen so that everyone can kind of adapt and learn what's working and what's not. So now they're saying, hey, here's our guidelines. They've published it, the Nordic Film Guide from Hobby Film here in Stockholm, and saying, like, here are the precautions we're taking. So if you have a commercial, we'll cast it. You know, Stockholm is a relatively diverse place in terms of casting. Probably not for large crowd scenes, but for smaller, you can find people. There's a huge, you know, a hugely diverse landscape here in Scandinavia, even though you think blonde hair, blue-eyed, tall, gorgeous, like not everybody. Not to say not everyone is gorgeous. Everyone is gorgeous. I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying. So yeah, it's an interesting opportunity where I'm at right now, but I'm also trying to, like I said, counter it with my feelings and my emotional state towards, like, if I was in LA, I wouldn't be doing this, you know?
Yeah. I mean, your environment dictates so much about that.
Right. And I think that's the context.
I'm losing your audio.
It keeps going in and out, and I don't know why. Zoom. So we're just gonna have to make the best of it, y'all. I don't know. It's gonna keep going in and out. I don't know. But yeah, like, I think it's here. It's like, well, you must know, but it's not even about the industry. It's the temperament of people here in Los Angeles. It's, you know, it's hard, like going outside for a walk when you're cooped up all day and you have to wear a mask. All of that stuff. It's a first world problem, and it's a small, I think, compromise to make in the long run for the better of everybody and to get past this. But with so many people not really taking this seriously, and so many people going against the government, and understandably so, not everybody agrees with our current president. It's really tricky. It's just a really tricky time to be alive from that perspective. But I don't want to get too political about it. But I do think I think it's really great that Sweden and the Nordic countries have sort of figured out a way to go through this transition that gives us a little bit of hope. Because here in LA, I'm sure you've been keeping a finger on the pulse of everything production related. It's not looking good, you know, and there's really no hope for, like, when, aside from a small doc crew, you know, 10 to 15 people, like, when any semblance of a normal production could go back to what it was. And so it's going to be an interesting thing. I think we just have to stay positive through it all. And I know that that's like the cheesy, obvious thing to say, bumper sticker response, but it's like day by day. And one of the things,
there's a reason they sell those bumper stickers.
That's true. But I think, you know, one of the things I love about you is, like, even though we haven't, like, even seen each other, since sometime in 2019, even before you, like, you're always active in these conversations and what's happening in our industry. Always you've been, especially now from Sweden. And I think that's awesome. I think that you really are sort of one of our little warriors out there who's kind of like, you know, keeping us all connected and building a sense of community, which was one of the main things I aim to do, hopefully am doing with Life with Kaka, is sort of is bring all of these experiences and create a place where we can all learn from each other and have these conversations that oftentimes are not being had. And there's a lot of confusion, or, you know, just people just don't talk as much as they should. I think women especially.
I'm a huge fan of conversation and discussion and community building is so important to me. I really, really, truly believe that there is room for all of us and for all of these stories. And the only way that new and diverse voices can have opportunities is if we all work together and help each other out. Because, you know, if something comes across my plate that's not right for me, but it's right for somebody else, pass it along. If something like this, a global pandemic, happens and we're all trying to figure out how to move forward, don't hold it close to your chest. Don't say, this is going to be me. I'm going to be the one to solve all of this, because we are in the most collaborative business and industry in the universe, you know,
now more
making
than
a film. Absolutely. I mean, talk about essential workers. I mean, people are, I'm not saying, let me take a step back there. I'm not saying that we are essential workers. What I'm saying is the idea that we are one of the industries in which people are relying on art, but nothing can be created to the scale in which they're going out to consume it. You know, exactly. And because we can't do our jobs without working together.
Yeah.
You know, sure, there can be a self-quarantine movie made if a DP and an actress live together, or, you know, a photo campaign if a photographer lives with a model, or even not a model, and that's great for representation, you know. But overall, if you're looking at movies or TV or even content that in the ways that we're used to, we have to work together.
Yeah.
So
it's it requires a group of people at a certain point. Like there's only so much art you can create totally alone. And like you said, to still be engaging and active, I think the hurdle is so much bigger if you decide you want to like write and act in your own thing that you shoot in your bedroom over Zoom. Like it's gonna be harder to get people's attention. But look, everything can be done, and I do think that there's going to be a renaissance of creativity on the other side of this, that it will be really exciting. And a lot of friends feel very optimistic that our industry on the other side of this will flourish more than ever, and we'll find a way. I mean, we have found ways multiple times before, not just as people in this industry, but as the human race. You know, we are extremely resilient. We don't remember it because we were not alive, but we've gone through this before. We've gone through different versions of this and worse things from this. So I think it presents a unique opportunity of growth. And
it's interesting to see how it'll change too, because if you look at the history of, you know, art, not in a motion picture sense, but paintings, and over the course of history, and you can tell the time period that it was painted in just by looking at it, you know, what's working. I'm interested to see what this does for the next 2 years for the films that are created right after this. Like, are the stories going to be different? The sets will have to be more intimate and small to start off with. So are the stories going to be more intimate without the full intimacy? Because now we can't have, you know, sex scenes necessarily. Like, so what are the stories and how are they going to change? You know, we can rely heavily on VFX for huge crowd scenes, but are we going to have a lot less, you know, epic sagas come out of this and really focus on, you know, nuanced storytelling? It'll be really interesting to see, you know, 10 years from now, looking back, can you tell like, that was made right after, you know?
Yeah, that's a post-corona movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Time will tell, but I'm optimistic and not excited, but like looking forward to seeing what doors this opens and people's souls and where we go from here. And in the meantime, you know, in the in-between of it all, like just trying to be a light for others. I think that as freelancers, as people who have sort of been in this sort of constant state of unknown that is our industry, and especially as freelancers, I think it provides a unique perspective in navigating these times that, you know, a lot of other people in my life who have gone more traditional paths in their career they've never experienced something like this. And so to be able to be an emotional support for them, I think is great. And if that's where I can contribute and where I can show up, then I'm here for it. You know, that's part of it. But okay, so I want to get into you. Enough about Corona. She steals the spotlight all the time.
Right.
But I want to so tell me about, just give me a brief sort of take me back to how you discovered producing. And
by accident. By accident.
That's a very common answer, which I find
to
so
fall
lovely.
into it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess by accident, but at the same time, if I really go back to, you know, when I was a kid, I've always loved film, and at an early age, you know, anytime, second grade, third grade, there was a class project, I was like, I'm going to make a video. So I remember doing a newscast, basically, by the way, not to bring it back where we just were, but on the bubonic plague, we were learning about it. And instead, you know, everyone was doing these reports, and I decided to turn my report into a video production, which my dad filmed on his old, like, gigantic camcorder.
Yes.
I pretended to be Christina Anmanpour, and I was a reporter, and I was reporting from my house in Montana, and that's one of the times I remember falling back in love with film. But I wanted to be an actress, and I studied and trained as an actress my entire life. That's what I went to all the summer camps, Stanford Summer Institute, musical theater camp. I ended up going to Sarah Lawrence to study theater, and then ended up transferring halfway through and graduating from the USC School of Theater. So that was my path. And I had lofty dreams, to then transition into, I was also a writer. So I was like, I'm going to write my own script and star in it, and I'll, be in charge. That'll be it. That's kind of where my head was at. And when I came out of college, I started to get into nannying, because I was like, I'm going to go out on all these auditions. So I need a job that's, easy to go out on auditions.
Yeah.
Didn't go on a single audition. But by the way, like, it is this, and I'm sure we could talk about this at length, but a giant fear of failure, where I was like, I know I'm good at this. I've been told I'm good at this, but like, if I don't really try, I can't really fail,
Yeah.
So eventually, the kid that I was with, who's one of my very close friends now, he's like 13 or 14 now. It's crazy. I started with him when he was 11 months old.
Oh my God.
I needed, he was going to school, so I needed a new job. And his mother, one of my best friends, found in one of her mommy groups an assistant position at an advertising agency. And I hate advertising, says the girl who owns a company that does branded content.
Yes, I was in the advertising industry for a decade.
Exactly. But when I joined, I literally, in my interview, said to one of the three owners, I would love to be your assistant. I don't like advertising, so I would really like to not do anything to do with your company. I'm happy to get you coffee. I was like, sign me up to be a PA, but I don't want to be in the film industry. That was kind of what I was saying to him. Yeah. I was like, I'm an actress, and I would like to be able to go out on auditions.
Oh my God. I'm sure he rolled his eyes. How many times people hear that in LA?
I mean, seriously. So I was hired, and 3 months later, they asked me to come on full time. And I was very, very fortunate that one of the other owners of that company is another one of my best friends at this point, and he was making a feature film and said, hey, I know you like making movies. Do you have any interest in assisting me with this? And I said, yeah, absolutely. It's like, okay, but just so you know, you still have to do all of your duties, for here. Can't, like, if you're assisting me, that's not your job. So I said, absolutely, let's do it. 3.5 months later, I didn't have a single day off. I worked on the film. There were many, many ups and downs. We all know about independent filmmaking.
Yes.
But
the energy you have in your 20s, that's
absolutely. I could not do that again. Could not do that again. But it was one of the, best crash courses in actual filmmaking and producing. I ended up associate producing that movie because it ended up taking 2.5 years to make. It went through reshoots. I did some of the writing for those reshoots. I was there for the casting. At one point, our line producer left, and I took over line producing, and then the accountant we had never done film accounting, so I took over that. So I kind of got a really, really big crash course in, like, hey, here's how you just produce this film.
And you still wanted to do it afterwards. That's impressive. Most people would have gone the other way.
That's what made me fall in love with it. I was like, I could do this. Like, I could see all the parts, I could see all the pieces. And I would say that I, tend towards creative producing. Right now, I'm going through major changes in my career, but I really love development and being able to help bring, new and unique voices to the table, but helping other people have their vision come to life and going through that process of how do we make it better, not how do we make it better for the market or change the story you're trying to tell, but how do we find those moments in the story you're trying to tell and bring them to life and do them justice. So that's kind of where I'm at. But anyway, so I was, we did that feature, and that company at the time was primarily website building. They had a lot of huge clients, and that was kind of when we started transitioning into commercials, and I was the person at the company who knew how to make movies. So I started making the commercials. So I've had a very unique and privileged trajectory in the industry, in that from that moment on, I helped build the production department, the video department at that company, to where that was like primarily what they were doing before I left. But I was always in a hiring position at that point. Like I ended up being the director of video production there. And from the very beginning, I was hiring everyone. I wasn't a PA on set, So I hired people I thought were best for the job. I hired people I thought should be in the industry. So it wasn't until probably 4 years later, admittedly, where I was on set with one of my first ACs. She's like, I can't believe there are so many women on this set. And I was like, come again? I was like, what do you mean? She's like, I'm usually the only one. And it sounds like something that everyone knows, but I didn't, because I always had a lot of women on set, So
because you got to control.
Because I was hiring.
You were hiring them.
I was hiring. So I didn't realize. I was like, well, what do you mean? I was like, what about this department? This department? She's like, no, never anyone in like my department, or, so that was kind of a big eye opener for me, and has kind of changed my trajectory.
What year was that?
God, I want to say 2013, maybe 2013, 2014. And I was with that particular company for 7.5 years, actually doing the advertising in the end. One of my biggest clients was one of the biggest theater chains in the United States. Like I was doing junkets. I had that side of the industry, which was interesting. I got to do promos for movies that were coming out. So I got to see that process along the way, because the director of the feature we did is a huge A-list DP. I worked with one of the owners of the company to form advancedfilmmaking.com, which was an interview series with Faden Papa-Michael, Janusz Kaminski, and Wally Pfister, where we were really trying to get into how do you make it in the film industry, but not from a technical standpoint. How do you, emotionally deal with these things? How do you deal with being on set for months at a time if you have a family? How do you get the job?
And what were the
join a union?
What were some of the answers?
I think what you learn is that everyone's trajectory is different, and there is no one path, as you know, into this industry, and everyone deals with it differently. You've got some of them have been divorced, some of them are happily married, some of them are happy with their divorces. That's how, and that's just family life in particular. Like, how do you get the job? They all had different paths. Film school, some went to film school, some don't go to film school. And this was an interview series with other directors and gaffers and key grips and producers, on a huge scale in the industry. So these were, people who have made it.
Yeah.
They can make anything, happen. Yeah. And no one's path is the same. Mm-hmm. And that was so interesting to be a part of, and to see, and to be on set of some, huge movies, to try and conduct these interviews and realize that what it really comes down to is connections. That's what it always comes down to. That's what it always comes back to, is your connections.
Right. Relationships, which is why I preach so much on the show, kindness and generosity. Absolutely. And who you're going to be and how you're going to show up, and how in this industry, it's like you have to be the same person in all areas of your life. Like whether you're on set, or you're at a networking thing, or you're just meeting someone for coffee, or you're holding the door for someone, like it just breeds this idea that, and it should be this way, but my understanding is that people who work in traditional, more corporate settings can have a little bit of separation between those two lives or identities. And in our industry, you sort of can't, because you could be taking yoga and be next to someone who can get you your next job. Like it's just sort of this weird thing where it's all around
always
all
on
the time. So you are always on, thus then be on as like a true, genuine, authentic version of you, hopefully from a place of kindness, because regardless of where the journey takes you, it's going to make it that much sweeter,
Yeah, absolutely. I truly believe that. I think you are right.
I am right.
Yes, you are.
I will say that. I think if there's anything, anyone listening, if you're new to the industry, or you're transitioning into a different facet of it. I think that's the biggest takeaway. And that's, I think when people ask me for advice, it's like I always say the same thing, because all the hard skills you can learn, all of the nitty gritty stuff you can truly learn. I mean, even if you wanted to go learn something extremely technical, like what a DP does, like you can learn that too. It takes a little bit of time, but the stuff you can't really learn is just innate to who you are. That stuff is just a decision you make on like a spiritual level of how you're going to show up. And I can't give you that. No amount of money can give you that. No amount of opportunity can give you that. So make that decision early on. And funny thing about making that decision, then people with hiring power will start to hire you because they want that energy around. And thus you blink and a decade passes and you've built a career.
That's how we get in branded content, specifically like with my company. That's what I hear when brands hire us back. Like, I really loved the energy on set. I really loved how everyone worked so well together and seemed to like truly enjoy working together. You know, that's hiring again from a hiring perspective. Yes, as a freelancer, like you get the job that way, but also I'm very specific when I'm hiring my crew. I'm all about opportunity, and my big thing is representation and inclusivity on set, behind the camera, and in front of. But that includes like the little thing that says, I don't care who you are. If you come onto my set and you're throwing around negative energy, I'm not hiring you again. That's the one thing. Like, I can deal with a mistake happening, technical mistake on set, something like that, footage getting erased, like God forbid, but like I could deal with that over bad attitude on set. That I can't. And this is to say, I understand that sometimes people are going things, and I think I'm pretty good at determining they're going through something, so they're having a bad day, they're not at their best, versus toxic attitude.
I think that is
different. There's a difference.
And that to me is the inherent job of a producer is to learn how to read people and where they are emotionally in their day. And if this is just a person who's having a bad day, or if it's somebody who's actually going to be a fire in some way, shape, or form, a situation or a person, whatever the thing may be, you're constantly assessing you're we were talking about this off mic, like you're constantly real-time problem solving and assessing situations, because some things are not fires, but the person thinks it's a fire. Like there's no cream cheese at Crafty, or some things are actual fires. And what I've learned is that the people that often need the most help are never the ones that ask for it. I don't know if you've seen that. They're the ones that are in the corner, just like buried in work and completely stressed, melting down, and they never want to show it because they're consummate professional. And those are the people that we have to really, I think, look out for and support, because they don't want to disappoint anyone. They tend to be people pleasers, and they tend to be women. And so
unfortunately,
it's true, but I think that it's so awesome. Like, one of the things I love about your company, and having been on one of your sets, can say that is 100% true. And that this idea of inclusivity in front of behind the camera, you've been talking this and preaching this since before it was popular, since before these were buzzwords that everybody's been throwing around. And I applaud you for that, because I think that's
thank
wonderful.
you. I think it's extremely important to keep talking about it. One of the things, I had a series that you actually participated in, my apparently interviews, where we were interviewing people in all facets of the industry about inclusivity and representation. And right now, during, not to bring it back to COVID, but coming back to COVID, I am really hyper aware of continuing to be a very loud voice in moving towards a more inclusive and representative industry, because I'm afraid that as things go back, we're going to look for comfort or the easy way out. Right. And some of these conversations or buzzwords might kind of fade in the distance a little bit and have to have a resurgence years from now. And I'd really like that not to happen. Yeah. So, I'm trying to bring back this series and to have these discussions and to, really, really talk about how important it is that we completely move forward at the same pace as we have been, to try and make some changes.
Yeah, I agree. So take me to Apparently Jack then. How did that launch?
So it was, I went from one company to another advertising agency where I was meant to start a production company arm of that particular agency. It didn't end up going in that trajectory because they found another niche that was very lucrative and they were doing really well in. So they kind of went this direction.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of staying on board for that journey, because I wasn't interested in, it was more photo shoots and that kind of thing, in lifestyle and fashion and beauty. And so I really wanted to be more involved in storytelling and, inclusive stories, specifically where, our writers have a seat at the table for the story that they're telling. And so I thought, I really want to preface this by saying I was in a very fortunate position, privileged position in my home life. I had a boyfriend who's now my husband who was doing very well financially for us. So I had the opportunity to say, I'm going to quit my job and start my own company.
Yeah.
With no investment or startup capital, and I'm going to completely, bootstrap it. So I recognize the privileged position I was in, and then it's been, years now to where, sure, I haven't built it up to the place where I wanted it to be, but I'm extremely proud of it,
Yeah.
So when I started it was a question of, what are we going to be? Are we going to be a production company that just produces what, creative that's brought to us by agencies or by brands? Are we going to have a roster of directors or cinematographers? What is the model in which I want to be? And I really, truly believe that branded storytelling, this is one of the things I had tried to preach so strongly at the other company as I was at. Branded entertainment to me is not a commercial. It is a storyline driven film that could be any length. It could be a short film. It could be a feature. It could be docu-style. But it's really storyline driven, and it incorporates a brand or brand values or idea. So I have forever wanted to be like a producer, an independent film producer, right? But I'm also extremely pragmatic, and I want to be able to support myself and my family. And I am not that producer that is necessarily willing to, live scraping by to try and not to make a project. I will help a project get through and I will scrape by there. But in general, my life, I want to be at a higher level to where I can do more good than just focus on one project.
Yeah.
So, the idea is get writers who have unique voices, who are underrepresented for whatever reason, who have great stories to tell, and have a brand sponsor that vision. I really wanted to do features and short films specifically that were brand sponsored, but not brand commercials.
Right.
So that's where it started. That was the whole purpose of the company. That with a very, very strong focus on, representation behind the camera as well as in front of the camera, making sure our hiring practices were focused on that. And it's hard. It's really hard because I have worked with Fortune 500 companies. I have, helped spearhead campaigns that were huge, that have, so many millions of eyeballs. And I had connections to CMOs and CEOs. But I also have this little moral thing in the back of my head where I was like, I'm not chasing after any of the relationships I've already built at brands, because those clients belong to companies I'm still friends with.
Right.
I didn't have bad experiences where I was like, I'm going to stick it to them and steal their client,
Yeah.
I don't like that. I also have a really hard time morally putting work that I've done in the past for another company on my website. So if Apparently Jack was not, if the contract between the brand was not with Apparently Jack, it was with a different company, I can't put them on my website. I can't say I worked for Regal Cinemas, because I did as a producer,
right. But not Apparently Jack.
but not apparently Jack.
And a lot of people do that, right? Especially when they're starting a new thing.
So many. I watched so many companies like appear out of nowhere, and I was like, wait, how do they have 50 videos on their website? And I realized it's because of all the people that they're, so it's a tactic, and a lot of people take it. So I knew going in that because I wasn't going to do that, and I was starting from scratch trying to build relationships, that it was going to be hard, because your ideas can be great, your team can be top notch, but that person in marketing needs to sell it to their boss, and they need to see what you've done. So it took us 1.5 years to get enough of a reel to be able to sell ourselves through a cold email based on our reel, and that was me working for free. That was me saying, my company is not going to take anything, but I'll produce this for you, and we'll give you, we'll do it for less, we'll give you more, and here you go. And we have some fantastic clients. I'm also very specific about, the clients that I try and take on. I want them to also feel strongly about representation and inclusivity, or doing good, or, just be lovely people to work with.
Yeah.
We know that that's difficult to find. But so it took a really long time to get enough traction and build. And I was very, very fortunate to have some great partners. One of the directors that I work a lot with, Katie Koblitz, you've worked with.
Yeah.
And she's just got such a great and unique voice, and was just there with me side by side, like knowing that we were on this journey together. And then I said, hey, by the way, I'm getting married and moving to Sweden. 2.5 years in, wasn't the plan, We were planning on waiting a little bit longer to move to Sweden. I was going to build Apparently Jack up for 5 years to have it be standalone, to where I could hand over and, maybe the CEO reins to someone based in LA, and then open up another office in Stockholm and have it be LA Stockholm. That was the plan. You can't leave 2.5 years without like making a ton of money and have that be the plan. It doesn't work.
It's true.
So I'm shifting, I'm shifting, I'm changing.
What are you shifting to?
So I've had to take a really, take a step back and say, what part of this do I really love? The industry in Stockholm is different than LA. To some extent, some things are easier. Permits, not at all like in LA. So unions, insurance, all the things that are some of the most difficult pieces of things you have to really, really learn to make it as a good producer in LA aren't really barriers here. So that's good. The languages, and I'm learning Swedish. I've been learning consistently for, I would say 1.5 years now, and I can understand what people are saying. It's harder for me to say things myself.
Yeah.
Ideally, I'd love to be in the Scandinavian drama or film or TV, industries, but I do know that coming in as an outsider who doesn't speak the language, that's hard. I can't do that right now, So my question has been like, what do I focus on? And also, I haven't closed Apparently Jack. Apparently Jack is still working in LA. I've been back and forth the last year 3 times and had, I think, let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shoots over the last year in LA from living in Sweden, where I've started the creative and gone back to shoot. So that is viable. That works. That, you can produce from anywhere. As long as you trust your team and your team, and especially if you can fly back for the shoot, it works. I don't think, sure, I've had client calls at 2 a.m. my time, but you do that because you need to. But for the most part,
small price, right?
It works, right now you're in LA, I'm here, like it's fine to have these, different times of day. So basically, I started off when I finally got my work permit, which was just in February of this year, to be able to work in Stockholm. I started meeting with every top company that I could in Stockholm, doing pretty much branded content and TV and film, so that I could, kind of get in there. And then Corona happened, and I am in a very, again, grateful and lucky. Luck has a lot to do with it. I had built some relationships that started on a set in LA last year that introduced me to some people out here. And I'm currently in contract negotiations to become CEO of their production company.
Amazing.
In Stockholm.
Congrats.
Thank you. Can't name it yet just because that's not all like, let's do a
course,
follow-up
buttoned up.
episode 2 months from now and see what
Yes.
happens. But so it's a unique opportunity because every time I went into a meeting, I said, this, whether there's a job opening for me or not here in Stockholm, I want my experience to bring value to the company here. I didn't want to be a freelance producer because I couldn't do my best job as a freelance producer, not knowing and never having produced something in Stockholm.
Right.
But I can bring my experience from LA, my experience from Hollywood, my experience from working with these brands, and having Apparently Jack. That can be an asset to a company here. And they saw that and they said, we'd love Apparently Jack to be a sister company. We'd love to be able to say to our clients, like, hey, we are based in Stockholm, but if you want to do a shoot in LA, we've already got a sister company there to do it.
It's like a revised version of your 5-year plan.
Yeah.
Think about it.
It is. It really is. It's so, hey, it's a very, very small company and they're looking to scale. So they are looking to be, I'll be honest, and I think even if they listen to this podcast, they wouldn't disagree. I looked and set up meetings with all of the top production companies in Stockholm. They were not amongst it because they are not. They've been steadily working for 10 years and they have had to turn down jobs. They have enough work. It's just, it's not a situation where like we have a whole production team. We don't, they're ready to scale.
Yeah.
But they need somebody to do that for them. Yeah. And I've done that 3 times now over the course of my career, where I've started with nothing, built a production department, left, went into a brand to help them build an in-house production department, built that, left, did my company, started to build it up. So it's finding, the right place for yourself. And that was one of the things I was so worried about coming here, that my husband was like, you just have to wait and find the right fit for you. Because I would have meetings where they're like, oh, you're not, it didn't go anywhere. I applied for, an in-house producer job. I wasn't the right person because I didn't speak the language, but for them, I'm the right person. And that's really exciting because they also, one of the first things, and, they got me with this, but one of the first things they said was, hey, I saw that Inclusivity Duh campaign you did. And we've been trying to find a way to bring that to the forefront of what we're doing. And we really appreciate it. I was like, yes. They're 2 guys and they said, we want a female CEO. We don't want to be 3 dudes. We want 50% of all of our sets to be female.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, we're all on the same page with how we want to move forward.
Amazing.
So it's really exciting because I now have the opportunity to have a job in Corona times, and B, really challenge myself to find the way to mesh these 2 worlds together and to grow something, bigger. So that's exciting.
It's super exciting. I do want to touch upon, just in keeping with the spirit of the show and talking about the messy parts of life with Kaka and messy transitions. I think you have this great spirit about you. And maybe I just always catch you when things are going well. I don't know. But
yes,
maybe that could be it. But, I'm just so curious. Especially this past year, you've gone through so many transitions and there's so much that I'm sure has not been easy. So how have you, in your past, and especially now, gotten through these big transitions, big life transition, learning a new language, a new culture, all of that? How are you coping?
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that it's a good transition to, one of the things that I have always thought of as my other big cause in life is mental health awareness. And then I took a step back last summer when I was back in LA, and I was like, I want to do something. And I was talking to Katie and I was like, we should film something while I'm here, because I didn't have anything in the pipeline. And we decided that I would write a script and it would be something that mattered to me. And I took a step back and realized that I always tell people that mental health awareness and healthy mental health is a cause that I'm passionate about, and realized that I've never outwardly talked about it or done anything about it. So I wrote a very, very personal short film that took place in one room that, we did the casting for, and I was very lucky I had everyone volunteer, and we produced it. It's almost ready for release now. We're in composition. We're doing a sound mix and that kind of thing right now. But it's hard. Keeping your mental sanity, especially in this job and in this industry, is hard. And I have a history with depression, and it's always been a struggle to figure out how to get through the dark. Like, for me, work does that. So work helps keep me out of my head and focused on the task. So that's why, when I don't have anything to do or I don't have a project I'm working on, I try and pick one up. Because
so would you say so much of your identity then, and the way that maybe this is triggered, is related to your professional identity as a producer?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so intertwined. Like, we are one. Me and my job and my work and everything are one. I mean, but beautiful things come out of that. I find I am working with a couple writers right now where we have shopping agreements on scripts for features and for, large scale series, and, just focusing my attention on helping someone else bring their vision to life takes me out of my own head and helps me through. I also have a really good support system. Again, it's that I'm so lucky to have that support system. The job that I was just talking about back in November, where I met the person who introduced me to these people in Sweden, I cried for 4 days straight on that job. It was a hard job. That happens. I mean, I've been in this industry for how long? And still, a little commercial like that can still bring you down. Like, it was stressful. It was one of those situations where there was an agency, there was a production company, there was another production company, and then there was client. And like,
it's a lot of people.
A lot of people. And of course, budgets are shrinking these days. And so trying to make things happen for not enough, budget or time, when the ideas are so grand and you have to try and fit it in. That's part of what, at the end of the day, I can always be like, yeah, pat myself on the back. I did it. Like, we made this happen, and we should not have been able to make this happen. But there were a lot of tears involved in
you made it happen.
That process. And sure, you get to the other side, and that has always been the thing that I need to constantly remind myself about. And I told my husband very early on, like, sometimes it would be really helpful if you just remind me that I've gotten through to the other side before. Like, remember those times. And if you don't have someone who you can tell to do that, I've had friends before. Like, before I met him, I would like tell my friends, like, hey, can you remind me every once in a while, like, you've gotten through to the other side? Because sometimes when you're in the trenches and it's not going according to plan, or you, God forbid, you mess up, right? I've made mistakes in my career that you would think someone 8 years into doing this, you wouldn't make that mistake, right? And when that happens, I'm lost for days. I'm like, I cannot believe, I can literally think in my head, like, the 3 times I've made huge mistakes, and they still bother me today, like, I can't believe I was so stupid enough to not do, like, everyone knows that. Like, here's an example, and it's just embarrassing to even say out loud, but I know that it's helpful to say it out loud for other people. No, but it's like, what, 6 years into my career, I didn't have a photographer sign a contract? What? Like, what producer doesn't have the photographer sign a contract? And it ended up, thank God, being okay in the end. But there was a dicey time when they put something out there and there was no contract. Luckily, they did not do it in malice, and they were not trying to get away with anything. But, it was like based on a client hadn't announced the product.
Yeah. But I think, to your point, that the interesting, and I don't want to say dangerous, but the unique thing about the industry being a carve your own path, choose your own adventure, is that since there isn't like, well, here are all the things you should know, and here's what you should do by what point, sometimes things that seem obvious, that may be obvious to everybody, do get overlooked because you didn't go to school for 4 years where they taught you all of these like pragmatic things about the business. You just have to learn it by
But
doing
even
it,
if
and
you
frankly
know
by
them,
messing up, and you can
yeah,
forget. There's so many things that can come up, and I think that
for me,
aspect
that,
of forgiveness is
yeah.
huge.
Forgiving yourself for
Forgiving
sure
yourself is what I'm
as well.
saying,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we're always constantly learning. I mean, there's so much even I don't know, and it's always for me where it's like very a good reminder is the more I climb up in my career and I'm dealing with people who are very impressive and like at top level jobs and they don't know stuff, and I'm like, oh,
because you
okay.
can't know the way that every set is different, and every negotiation is different, and every relationship, like if you're talking specifically branded content, like every relationship a brand has with, you know, maybe the talent that they're in charge of, you know, they're all different, and you can't know the answer. Something happened, you know, a little more recently where there were, by absolutely no fault of mine or my company's, some negotiations that started to go sour with a client and one of their clients, you know? And it's like, I felt like I had these conversations, you know, with my husband. I was like, I feel like I did something wrong. He's like, well, did you? And I said, well, I didn't ask this question. And he's like, normally would you ask that question? And I was like, no, that's never a question one should ever have to ask. He's like, okay, well, are you going to ask it in the future? And I was like, yeah. Like, and I'm sure that I'm going to ask that question a million times and they're going to be like, no, you know, like simple. Why are you even asking me?
Right.
I'll be like, well, because that one time. And that's why, like, these days, like for me, contracts and, you know, agreements and, you know, those are so important, because even if you trust the person or know the person, or they're not even going to like maliciously try and get around their contract, if it's not in writing, you go from the very beginning. You know, I've got some projects that I've been working on here in Stockholm that, you know, I'm working with some great people. And I was like, hey, I know that we're going in this direction, but do you mind if I put this on paper and have us both sign? Because just for whatever reason, you know, somebody picks it up, or, you know, I get in a, you know, whatever it is, put it on paper, because then other things come up and you're like, oh, I didn't really think that this is what you meant when you said this, you know, get it, talk about it. And that's, again, going back to the idea that discussion and conversation is so important, not just to move these giant causes forward like representation or mental health awareness, but just to keep understanding where someone else is coming from. You know, you mentioned being on set,
granular level.
Exactly. You know, keeping how is everyone doing? You know, I keep connecting with people where it's like, I can't do anything. I can't hire them for a job right now, but I've worked with them so many times and I want to make sure they're doing okay. Like, you end up becoming friends, but there's also that like, well, if I'm going to be your boss, or, you know, it's lines like that get blurry sometimes, which is why I sometimes have to take a step back and be like, ooh, I shouldn't like comment on this or talk to them about this. But maybe just letting them know, hey, I know someone who, like, if you're interested. That's why I love putting people together. I love introducing people, because I might not be the right person to help them for whether it's career or whether it's personal, but somebody else might be. So it's just, we all, again, right back to, we all need to help each other, and there's room enough for all of us, and we can all help each other climb. You know, there's not a ceiling. This idea of a glass, any kind of ceiling, there is no ceiling. Like, things change. It's more like an ocean, like where things change and ebb and flow, and, you know, the industry is not going to be the same. I mean, you've got one of the problems, you know, one of the representation issues that people don't talk about enough is ageism in our industry, because when things go, this is not true for everybody, but when things go more digital or technological, or technology changes, somebody who might be, you know, used to working in the industry for 40 years and know it this way, hasn't gone to school recently, so they don't know, you know, that this is becoming big. Or shooting something for TikTok, you know, like brands are now hiring production companies to shoot their content for TikTok, you know, so they might not be used to that, and so they're not getting hired. And it's kind of like you're losing out on so many gems you could learn from that person that maybe they don't understand where this is going, or maybe they don't use the social network or whatever it is where this is ultimately meant to be. But damn if they couldn't help you. I had an incredible gaffer on a project recently who's been in the industry for decades, and as a female, and she's one of the best I've ever worked with. And she was able to look at gear lists and be like, oh hey, I know we're going for this, but I did this music video back in like the 80s that like we had $0 for, so maybe that's kind of the look and feel that we're going for. And it was just knowledge she took from one area that wasn't necessarily what we were doing over here.
Yeah.
But if we had somebody who didn't have her experience, I think it would have hurt the production in terms of budget. Like
for
you
sure.
can't forget all of these things, and that's part of like continuing conversation and introducing people, because you meet people. I don't really know how I got here. I kind of like I was talking about ceilings and how there was none, so there you go. Like,
well,
that's how we got there.
That there is no ceiling, that there's a place for everybody. And I think if there was a way to I'm always like, how do we create a system or a program where this is like mandated, like if there is a cool way to take, like, in terms of an internship where you have like a person who's kind of fresh out of school and they're always getting partnered with a veteran, and they together have to learn something new from each other. How cool would that be?
We're kind of doing something similar to that with this company. And in Sweden, we're doing like this kind of idea of this paid mentorship, like where every time we're having this new talent division where they're completely involved in the process, and it's less of directors competing against each other and more of a creative incubator with people from all aspects. So
that's awesome.
You can have ideas come from anyone on the crew or the company. Like it's not the director's job to come up with the ideas. It's not the producer's job. It's not, so
I'm so excited for you in this new chapter. Like, I think it's like you said, it's kind of a weird time to feel happy or optimistic about job opportunities when there's like so much that isn't going well for so many people. And I struggle with the same thing. But I think that perhaps being sort of given this opportunity to feel optimistic about certain things helps infuse that energy into other people's days and helps them feel a little bit more hopeful about their own journey. And so that's all any of us can really do. But I want to be mindful of the time, just because I can talk forever, and we've been at it for a while. So I just have a few more questions, and I want to make sure that, like, if there's anything that we didn't get to, that we get to. The first, which I didn't get to ask in the beginning, which is define a producer, and then from there, because I want to have a clean soundbite of that. And then the advice, that would be the next question. Advice you want to give to people, I think, particularly in this moment in time with the way the world is going, and I think you having a finger on the pulse of a new way and how Sweden is doing things, like you probably could speak to a little bit differently than others. So those would be the final questions.
Sure. I mean, as you know, having done this, this journey with Life with Kaka, defining what a producer is or does is nearly impossible, because it's different from job to job. I mean, I think that a producer is the person to make sure the job comes to life, whatever that means. It's putting the pieces together, but it's also understanding the path that it's on. It's being able to connect and work and understand people and human emotions. It's monitoring the budget sometimes. I mean, it also depends on which producer title you're talking about. Creative producer, line producer, executive producer. So, I mean, really, no matter what's in front of that producer word, a producer is somebody who's helping shepherd a project to life. At its very core, I think, is the baseline of
Yeah.
what that means. In terms of advice, are you looking for advice for people trying to get into the industry or navigating forward, or?
I mean, I would say whatever speaks to you right now. I think when I think of advice, like I don't think of like a 19-year-old necessarily who's like, do I want to be in this business? I like to think of the people that have been in it for a while and are either trying to stay in it, or are maybe pivoting into a different part of it and are just kind of finding their footing in the industry.
I would say listen to yourself and figure out what you love about this job in this industry, because that's something I've been trying to do more often now as I'm kind of going through these transitions, is figuring out, what aspects of production do I really, really love? I love it all, let's be honest. But like, what do I want to focus my time and energy on? Like, how am I going to help the most projects, come to fruition? How am I going to make a difference or help others make a difference? What is it about this industry that I love the most, or this process that I love the most? Because you could go for years being like, I'm really good at this, but you could hate that and just end up being miserable and pivoting anyway. Or you could say, I really want to do this. So for an example, like my goal is like, I want to be Kathleen Kennedy. I want to be a producer who can get anything made because people trust what I've done and because I'm so good at what I do. Not because I have all the money in the world to just finance anything I want, but because I am so good. And I specifically wanted to follow her, I wanted to be her because I wanted to make giant epic movies. But that's also not me. Like, I like watching those giant epic movies and I would love to like be on set for them.
Right.
But I really, really, really enjoy working with creators and voices to bring something to life that other people aren't going to spend the time on. Things that I read and I'm like, this is brilliant. Why isn't anyone making this? Let me see if I can try and get the story told. So listening to why you really want to be here instead of like these lofty ideas of like what you think you should be doing or that you think the path you should be on. I think that would be my advice. And of course, support everyone else around you. And I would say support, women and people of color and the LGBTQ community and the disabled community and, don't be ageist and, be represent, all of that.
Yeah, all of that. All of that.
All of that.
I mean, I think you nailed it. I think all of that stuff is right on the money. So I couldn't have said it better myself, but thank you again for taking the time again and doing this with me. I think I still have our old recording. I think it's a good time capsule.
I would be fascinated to listen to it just to see, if I've or actually, since I hate listening to my own voice, if you want to listen to it, just let me know how much differed from, originally what we talked about. Have I changed my, position that drastically? Be fascinating.
I don't think so. I think from what I remember of our conversation, you said similar things. I think you have obviously a different perspective now, 2 years, almost 2 years later, and being married and living in a different place. Hopefully you have grown since that time. And I feel like you have. And so, but so thank you so much.
Yes.
I can't wait to see what is next for you. And obviously we will be in touch.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you to everyone listening and for tuning in.
Thank you.
This was so fun. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.
Okay.
And hopefully, how do I stop recording? Bye.